Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I am Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 82. And this episode, we are joined by Grant Kirkhope, composer of so many different wonderful video games, definitely of pieces of your childhood if you don't immediately recognize the name. But we'll get into that. Grant, it's so nice to have you.
Thanks for asking me. I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, Grant, you're a person who I've known your work for so long, but I didn't honestly know you as a person very much until the internet era and like folks like Gerard the Completionist, who you've talked to and worked with and who I'm a fan of. And it was really stunning for me to like go back later and look like, oh, just about every game I played growing up, you've worked on to some degree or another, which is pretty great. You've had a long career that started, at least based on your website, in 1996 with Donkey Kong Land 2. And so my question is, for the first question, have you always wanted to compose for video games? Did you grow up playing video games and that was like the goal? Or did you start learning composition with a different goal in mind and happen to land in video games?
So I never once wanted to compose for video games ever. I never even wanted to be a composer. So I kind of went through school like everyone does. I did I was a classically trained trumpet player. So I ended up at the Royal London College of Music in Manchester in the UK. I did a 4-year music degree. During the time you're there, you're supposed to pass the harmony exam, at some point into 4 years. And I failed it like 3 times out of 4. I was so bad at harmony. And so I've managed to scrape by in the last year. I just managed to, just the skin of my teeth, I passed it. So I was terrible at it. So, never once thought I could compose for anything. But I was kind of a self-taught metal guitar player from the age of 12. So I played lots of metal bands and all sorts of stuff like that. So I kind of wrote songs for the metal bands that I was in. So after I left college at 22, I spent the next 11 years of my life sort of on and off unemployment insurance, playing in lots of local bands and different size bands. Some did well, some did awful. So I played guitar in some, I played trumpet in others. I actually played for quite a large UK rock band called Little Angels. On trumpet, and
cool.
we did like huge tours with them, like we supported Bon Jovi and Brad Adams and ZZ Top and Van Halen, and doing giant arena tours around Europe. It was incredible. Like it played to like 90,000 seat arenas in Germany and Wembley Stadium and all that stuff. So it was amazing to kind of get the opportunity. But then that band finally split, and I was back to sort of playing local bands again. Making a few pounds a night, and that was it. Living with my mother, still at home at 33. But one of the local bands I played for, a friend of mine, Robin Beanland, was a keyboard player, and he one day announced that he'd got a job, and I was like, "What?" Like no one I knew got a job. We all just like were on like unemployment, most of the time, and going on tour or playing in pubs or whatever, So I'm going to go work for a video company in the UK, in the Midlands called Rare. I was like, "That's the thing," It never crossed my mind, So he'd been there about a year and a half. And he said to me, Grant, you've been on unemployment for 11 years. Don't you think you should maybe try and get a job? And I was a bit like, well, what can I do? I'm completely untalented at anything, He said, well, why don't you try do what I'm doing? Why don't you try write music for video games? And I did play a lot of games at the time. So he recommended, I had like £1,000 to my name. So he recommended about a copy of Cubase and an Atari ST. I bought a Pro Tools FX synthesizer module. And I set about sort of writing tunes that I thought were appropriate for video games in like 1994. And I sent Rare 5 cassette tapes over the course of that year and never got a reply. And then out of the blue, I got a letter saying, please come for an interview. And I went down, for the interview. And Dave Wise interviewed me along with Simon Farmer, who was the general manager. And would you believe it? I got the job. I couldn't believe it. So that was it. I mean, at 33, my first job. So, it really was an absolute fluke. And if Robin had never thought to do it, who's, still at Rare, I would never have thought to do it. It would never have crossed my mind. So it's absolute fluke.
That's amazing. It's
That's
fascinating to me. I mean, obviously you said you played video games at the time. And I guess it's funny how we don't consider the different arts that go into things like games and movies when we're younger, right? We just think they come that way, right? Like it all comes together. Right. It's all one package. And it's not until you get older you learn, oh, there's a guy or girl or a non-binary person who that's their job. They do that thing. They bring that life to it.
It never crossed my mind to think about that. It was like, it wasn't a job ever that even composing never ever crossed my mind,
Yeah, for sure. And so, like, in the early days of Rare, I mean, like, it was hit after hit with those games, and you were involved in most, if not all of them. And, like, a lot of them are instrumental scores. But something I was always curious about is, like, Donkey Kong 64, the famous Donkey Kong rap, is so different from a lot of the other tracks that you made at that time, but you have this rock background. Do you find it's different or difficult to write songs for lyrics, music for lyrics, or is it just based, on your growing up playing in bands, like it's old form and something you're used to? Like, do you find that the two writing styles are really different?
Not really. I don't find that hard at all. It's fine. I think because I spent such a lot of time writing metal songs for the bands I was in, that you just get used to it. But also, I did a game a little while ago called Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle.
For sure,
and
yes.
There's a big opera scene in that where there's an opera boss sings insults to Mario. And that was the lady at Ubisoft Milan wrote the lyrics. Christine. Oh God, I'm completely blanking on her name. She's going to kill me. God, I can't believe it.
You're in good company. We blank on this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Christina. Oh my God, I can't believe it. I talk to her all the time. I'll think of it in a minute. So Christina, she wrote the lyrics, and I wrote the music. And so it's great fun. Also, I did a game called Peter Panic a little while ago, which is a little indie kind of game that was also based on like New York Broadway, really, a kind of bit of that kind of game. It's all lyrics based on that. I did that as well. So I don't mind doing that. It's fun writing to lyrics. I think us media composers, like we like to call ourselves these days, just do everything. We have to be able to do everything because like people expect you to do. It's Christina Nava. Just come to me now.
There you go.
Yeah. Sorry, Christina. But like I think you just have to be able to do everything because people just expect it. I think if you're like trying to be a pop artist or a rock artist, you do your thing. But as a kind of media composer, you can get asked to be doing anything from mobile phones right up to movies. So you have to be able to do everything in between. And every style, they're going to say, I want this to be a rap track. I want this to be an orchestral track. I want this to be a reggae track. You have to be able to get around most things. Otherwise, you're not much use to anybody. It's no good just being good at one thing. So I feel like you have to be kind of jack of all trades, these days.
No, that makes sense. Now, with that in mind, how much over the years have you had to learn either programming or the more nitty-gritty of integrating this music, or has it been much more of a write the tune, play the track, and then it goes over to whomever is going to put that program that into the game?
Yeah, so like in the early days, you had to get your hands dirty. You would
Yes.
have to get in there and do stuff. So, getting the music into the N64 or the Xbox or whatever it was, you had to, there would be a little kind of middleware program that sits in between you and the game engine. In the Xbox days, it was called XACT, the Xbox Audio Creation Tool. Nintendo used Musix for a while on the GameCube. And that would be a bit of program that would hold all the samples you'd program in. Well, you're not so much program, but you'd put in, how you want to sound. You'd put the loop points in, fiddle with stuff like that, and that would hold all the information and the MIDI files as well. So, basically, on any machine or on the cartridge machines back in the day, you'd create your own little MIDI orchestra. So, on Banjo Kazooie, I'd create, there'd be like a bunch of instruments, clarinets, flutes, whatever it was at the time, and there would be tiny, tiny, tiny samples that you crunched right down to like 16 kilohertz or less if you could get away with it. Nothing was anywhere near CD quality, and you had one note for an instrument. So the clarinet, I could sample a C3 and that would be it. And you'd try and get it small and loop it. And so obviously, as the note got higher, it got Mickey Mouse. As it got lower, it got whoa, whoa, whoa. So it would sound rubbish. So you'd have to like be careful. You'd work out what things sounded good at what point. And then your little MIDI file would go in there. So the MIDI file would physically, when it loads up in the game, it's got a little box at the start of it, and it would call up with a program number of the instrument. It would tell it where to pan, all that kind of information right at the start.
All the parameters.
And that would call it all up, and then it would play the samples, and that's how it worked. And you'd get the sample, it would decompress into memory and play. But it was like 1 megabit or something for Banjo Kazooie. For the whole lot, sound effects and music, it was absolutely tiny. I think GoldenEye was smaller.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, how we did it back then, I can't believe it sounds even half decent, really. So it's amazing.
Oh yeah. Well, especially N64, space is at a premium. You got more than 1 megabit. You've added $10 to the cost of the game, and now you're in trouble.
Yeah, completely.
As far as technology has evolved and as we get CD quality sound, and I imagine a lot of video game composition recording sessions more resemble film scoring recording sessions. How has the getting your hands dirty, how has the nitty-gritty changed for you?
So my hands are now clean. I don't do any of that anymore. So since I'm freelance now, I just literally compose the music and send it off, and they do all that. So there's not an awful lot of messing around that I do. I might sometimes provide some stuff in stems, so like by instrument, so they can do a mix on the fly. So sometimes I want that. I feel like audio's slightly less manipulatable now because you can't in MIDI files. It's super easy to manipulate stuff.
Oh yeah, it's pure computer.
Yeah, and
pure
you can
code.
speed it up, slow it down. All that stuff. It's really easy. And when I did that kind of channel fade thing on Banjo Kazooie, where the music would morph as you wandered about into different versions of the tune, that was all in one MIDI file. That was easy. It's just like turning MIDI, channels up and down. But it's harder when it's just a stereo wave. You've got to have multiple versions of that stereo wave playing at the same time, but you can't hear them, and then you kind of crossfade between the two to get to like some kind of new part of it. And of course, at that point in time when you crossfade, it's double the CPU time. Everything's doubled up, double the memory space. For those few seconds that it takes to crossfade. Mm-hmm. So, I guess things are getting more powerful now, but it's still an issue about memory size. And there's no music in a game currently that's at full quality. Even right now, everything is still compressed to some degree. It might be high quality compression, like a 320, like MP3 or whatever, or on something like that. But it's still compressed because audio takes up gigantic amounts of space. It really does.
Yeah, it does.
If you've got an uncompressed wave that's 24 kilohertz, 48 bit, that's a big space. I guess there's some tunes with 30, 40, 50 meg per tune. And you can get an MP3 as crunch it right down. So it's a big resource audio like that.
Have you ever run into, on whether N64, Game Boy, all the way up to modern times, have you ever run into a point where you have made samples, you have composed something, and then you got back, you're going to have to scale that back a little bit?
Yeah,
because everyone's fighting for real estate.
Yeah, definitely sometimes. Yeah, something like that. You kind of have to go, can you just crunch it down a bit more? Is there something you can do to it? Can you reduce the sample rate on that sound effect? I just do music now, so it's not as much a concern for me. It usually ends up being the audio director or the audio guy at the company that takes care of that. If he has to do it. But they budget it, and I guess there's more space these days. I mean, a DVD's like 4 gig, isn't it? I mean, and a Blu-ray's like 40 gig, is it? Something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah, so
Massive.
you've got more space. But I mean, if you'd have told me in 1995 when I was working on the Game Boy at the start of it, was like 3 channels and a noise channel, and the 3 channels played 1 note each, and that was it. You couldn't monophonic,
Oh yeah.
That I'd end up, working with live orchestra within like 10 years, or with like 8 years. I would never have believed it. It's incredible to go from like Game Boy to like full live orchestra. It's just like, how did that happen,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have to wonder, obviously, when you were working on games like GoldenEye and Banjo Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64, there was some semblance of pedigree for Rare, but not really, right? Because you guys were just starting out. But by the time you got to Banjo Tooie and Perfect Dark, and even later on the Xbox Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, there must be some kind of pressure to deliver something as memorable as previous scores, right? But in the early days, you probably didn't know how big Banjo Kazooie was going to be, or Donkey Kong 64 at the time.
No, absolutely no idea. I still find it sort of amazing that 20 odd years later, people are still talking about it. It's you think you might do something that lasts maybe 6 weeks, 6 months, and then it's forgotten about. It never occurred to me I'd still be talking about it at this point. So it's hugely humbling to think that people still like it, But I guess in some respects, I think, I realized sort of very recently, if you're by even the tiniest part of somebody's childhood, when I think back to when I was a kid, I remember, I was like between that kind of 8, 9, 10, 12, that kind of age group, 13, 14, that kind of thing. I remember all the theme tunes from all the shows that I watched, like Thunderbirds or Scooby-Doo all the words to all the songs. You never forget that for the rest of your life. So
You'll forget your name first.
Yeah, I do think I think that you remember those kid things forever, right? Till you die. And I feel like people that played stuff that I worked on and other composers worked on really remember it super vividly in that kind of time frame. So I guess the kind of 20 or 30-year-old people now who are thinking back to the childhood remember little old me, doing that stuff. And I guess, like you said before, with the advent of the internet, people can get you. When I started a Twitter account, I had 10 followers or something. I never really thought much of it. It was something you did to kind of, talk to your mates or have a laugh with your mates and all that. You had 20, 30 followers, maybe it's just your friends, wasn't it? And then I guess once people start finding you, because you can get to that person these days, you really can, it's crazy. I can't believe I've got 80 odd thousand followers. I mean, I really sometimes think I'm somebody else. I think I'm confused with another Grant Kirkhope who's super famous. It's like a bit bizarre, really. So I think that's changed everything. You can really get to that person that if you really want to most of the time.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we're super thankful. I reached out to you on Twitter, and you said submit through your site, and now here we are chatting, and I want to thank you again for taking the time. My next question is talking about a game that you worked on that has a legacy like Ghostbusters and its own soundtrack and its own movies, and then you get to work on the game. Was there any pressure to keep the mood of the movies, or did they let you kind of have free reign and let you find your own inspiration?
Well, I mean, I think they wanted to be movie-esque, but I mean,
right.
For me, I think I was thinking that anyway. Like there's great parts in that movie where it's just full of whole tone scaly stuff, and I just put that everywhere, in that game. And I had a month to do that. It was super fast, so I had to turn it around really quickly. But I mean, to get to touch a franchise like that is like super fun, because you just cannot beat a haunted house style haunted game thing. Like it's just the best, right? You can mess around with it, and it's just, especially when it's a kind of funny haunted thing, it makes it even better. It's not like creepy. It's just I can't describe, like Beetlejuice or things like that. It's just super fun to do. So, I just tried to do my best Ghostbuster impression that I possibly could.
And that sounds like the right way to go. Yeah, it's got all the window dressing of proper horror, but really it's just, we're all having fun here.
Yeah, I feel like, being back at Rare in the day and writing that kind of spooky tunes of Banjo Kazooie and Donkey Kong, it's the same thing really. It's just, you've got to find a way of making it palatable and not scare people. Like when I was doing like Mad Monster Mansion, I remember thinking, that was in Banjo Kazooie, I remember thinking, how am I going to get some dark chords into this and not scare the kids, And I was a big Danny Elfman fan at the time. John Williams is my hero forever, but Danny Elfman was I really liked him in those days. And he's great at doing that kind of dark music, but it can keep it kooky and whatever to make it not too scary. So I listened to Beetlejuice, and I noticed it had that kind of umpa, 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 umpa. I was like, oh, right. So if you have the dark harmony, but then there's some kind of light element to it, like the rhythm's a bit wacky, or people don't, or the melody's not really kind of scary. People feel the kind of darkness of it, but they don't get scared by it. And that my little light bulb button, I went, oh right, that's how you do it. So that's why I was like umpiring all over the place, with the dark chords, and it just worked out great. So. I think that's all part of that kind of comical horror stuff. You can really do it. You can have real fun with it if you just get it,
That's fantastic. I do have to say, minor anecdote. I told my wife, who is also a very avid gamer, that Matt and I would be interviewing you. She didn't recognize your name. I said what you worked on, and the N64 is her favorite system, and she was like, "Oh my god!" Like she doesn't even really listen to the music to games that often, and she was like, please tell him I love Creepy Castle.
I love doing that one. That's my little sort of Addams Family sort of nods. It's got a little finger click in there, and that's a good spooky tune, that one. And the start of it, I wrote that start of it before I worked at Rare. That was one of the demos that I wrote to kind of get the interview, which I never replied to. So I kind of stuck the first bit and put the second bit on it. And it's like my little Addams Family, Monsters sort of thing,
Fantastic. Well, also speaking of DK64, one of the other pieces that certainly is in the pop culture lexicon of my household, and I imagine a few others, is your voice clips as Donkey Kong. How did you end up being the voice of Donkey Kong for first that game and then for several other Nintendo titles, it appears to be? That was
just, back then, usually, you just did it to be quick. Like no one wants to do it, so I'll just do it to get it done. Because it was like, it's tiny little samples, and it was just easy, and nobody wanted to do it. I said, "Oh, look, I'll just do it. Let me do it." It's like that. You don't think it's going to be something that lasts a set of time. So that all that kind of banana and all that stuff that goes on. That was
anytime we buy bananas, anytime we're really tired, and it's like, "Can you do that?" Okay.
Well, because when I do it now, it doesn't sound like, I pitch my voice down to make it sound a bit more like monkey-like, I suppose. I guess monkeys don't speak right, but you know what I mean. Yeah. So I just did it for the sake of it, and like you said, it was bizarre that Nintendo asked me for the samples to use later on. I was like, "What? Are you crazy?" So that was kind of, it's those are little things that are super funny that you don't think about at the time. It just happens, and you just do it to be quick and get on with it, and you don't realize it's going to. Like 20 years later, people are going, "What? You said banana from Donkey Kong?" It's super fun.
Oh goodness.
Um, Going back to some of the influence you mentioned, like Danny Elfman and John Williams and all of these legendary composers that I'm sure you grew up loving and listening, have you composed any tracks for any games that are homages or like heavily inspired by those composers you grew up listening to?
So I'd say I did a game a little while ago called Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, which is this giant sort of RPG thing. And I've got a very big, giant orchestral soundtrack to it that was recorded in Prague. And I guess that was my attempt at some kind of John Williams-ishness. I spent I spent 4 years in that game, and I spent every day in the car. And I'm not lying. I had the first 3 Harry Potter soundtracks because John Williams only wrote the first 3, and I spent the entire time in the car of those years only listening to that music. And I'm not exaggerating. Every time I got in it, I listened. It was just on constant rotation to try and pick up that kind of magic that he does. And I'm not saying I got anywhere near it. I did my best, but like that was my proper attempt at it. And I learned something from doing that. Like the first boss piece was called Baylor, and I really thought, right, I just need to do this now and have a go at it. And thinking I'd make a complete mess of it. And I really tried super hard to kind of get all that. Because I feel like John Williams, he's known for the big themes, right? And he's great at that. But in between the big themes, he's got this kind of really exciting music. I kind of call his like tread water music, where it's not getting in the way of the action, but it's massively exciting. And he goes through like a million ideas, an idea every 2-3 seconds. I don't know where he gets it from. His brain must be like gigantic. But so I was trying to get that technique. But when it comes to the big moment, he's on the money with the melody, So I was trying to get that thing where you get hit with a big theme and it'd be all over the place. Hit with a big theme all over the place. So there's some tracks on my website if you ever get around to listen to it. But like that's the sort of, that was my big thing. And also did a game later called Civilization Beyond Earth and the sequel to Rising Tide. And that's great, big, huge, spacey music. It's also like, live orchestra recorded in Prague again. And that was another, they just said to me, can you write epic, hopeful music? And that, to a composer, that's like, is there anything better than that?
Right,
nothing,
yeah.
So, I think I always try to do John Williams. I guess, even in Mario Rabbids, I'm still thinking about that. So it's just something that I think I aspire to, because he's he's the last of a dying breed. I think he's like this. When he goes, there's going to be no one else like him out there. There's not a single other composer like that with that degree of excellence that he has. There's nobody like that. There's plenty of other great Hollywood composers, no doubt about it. But I feel like his particular brand, there's no one left apart from him.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that for me, as a fan of your work, the one thing I can see as a similarity easily to John Williams is like John Williams has a stamp. Like in all of his music, you can kind of tell it's his music when you hear it, right? You always know his scores from other scores. And I feel like your music too, like even if I hadn't known that you worked on Mario and Rabbids or Ukulele or even A Hat in Time, I genuinely didn't know you had worked on that one. I came to that game much later after it came out. I waited for the Switch version. And I'm listening to some of the music and I'm like, this has to be Grant Kirkhope. It sounds like his stuff. And lo and behold, it was. And like, I think I'm sure you maybe didn't set out to have a certain style. You just created what you felt was right. But there's definitely a stamp of your work throughout the games you've made. I definitely hear it.
I do think that, you can't help but having a sort of sound of your own. I think it's because, like, I'm a metal fan, right? So, like, when I hear Brian May play guitar, I know it's him a mile away. Just his vibrato, the way
instant.
His sound, Eddie Van Halen. You can tell him a mile away with the way he plays, and it's obvious, right? And I think it just comes out. It's just part of your personality. And I feel like when I write music, people often say you've got a Kirkhopean sound, which I think I didn't set out that at all. But I just think that I just probably use the same chord sequences over and over again. It's just the same thing, and I just put with a different tune. You know what I mean? So I just like the way certain chords sound, the way certain melodies sound, or the way I treat melody. I just like the way it sounds in certain ways. So I guess that's what makes it. You just do it over and over again, and so then it becomes your sound, right? Because you do the same thing over. So I feel like it's a bit like that, and I feel like most people probably have that because you just like the way certain things sound, don't you? And also, I think that I try not to listen to other games composers when I'm working on stuff. I like to try and pull it out of my own head if I can, and I will listen to John Williams for kind of inspiration, but I do try to pull it out of my own head, and that's probably it's probably good and bad. It probably means that I write the same stuff over and over again, over and over again, but it's not like anybody else because it's just out of my own head, So, yeah, I think that I do try to do that. And if it sounds like me, that's great. That's what I say. I'm happy. I'll take that. I'm happy with it.
Yeah. I mean, you're not composing every single video game soundtrack out there. So when it's your style and people find it, then it's a treat. It's a delight. It's something that people can go for. It's fine if we all have our style, and because you can go to different games, and the fact that you have your Kirkhopian style, and it can be recognized in Hat in Time and Ukulele, and those games are very much a nod back to the games you worked on originally with Rare, that they come back around, and it is part of that fabric. So I see no problem with it.
Yeah, no, I do feel like that, and I think that it like when I was doing Mario Rabbids, apart from the fact I was in complete dread, thinking how am I going to do this without the entire world hating me about making a mess of it, and my kids never speak to me again, There's no point in me trying to write that kind of poppy jazz that Nintendo do so spectacularly well, because I just can't write like that, So I thought I have to do something where it's a bit of me, a bit of Nintendo, and a bit of Ubisoft, where the Rabbids stuck together, and that's what I tried to do. And I guess it still sounds like me, but there's no point in me trying to copy Koji Kondo because he's just a legend, right? I just make an entire mess of it. Yeah.
And I think that's what makes Rabbids stand out on its own, right? Like, that's a game I played, and I knew I was getting a Mario game, but it's a third-party Mario game. They're teaming up with Ubisoft, so it's going to be different. And I think your music solidifies this feels like something from our past, but still feels present and different because you put your own style on a game with a character that has expectations. And I think that's why it works so well, because you took what Nintendo does and didn't try to imitate it. You tried to do it yourself, do your own version.
Yeah, that game, was such a bizarre thing because, it doesn't sound like the best pairing in the world, right? Mario and the Rabbids. Everyone's going, oh, this is going to be dreadful, But until you touch it, it is such a perfect pairing. It just works so well. And like Davide Soliani, who's the creative director at Ubisoft Milan, he says all his idea, and it just, it's such a great thing. It just works so fantastically well. The Rabbids are a bit irreverent, they take the mickey out of Mario all the time, and they kind of poke fun at him, and Rabbid Peach is a bit jealous of Princess Peach for Mario liking her, all that kind of crazy stuff. And it doesn't sound great, but it just works. So I mean, the game's still selling. It's 2.5 years down the line. It's still selling super strongly. Like, wow, yeah. People have really taken that game to their hearts. That was such a joy to do, and we had such a laugh doing it. It's like when you have such fun making a game, you sort of can't help but come up with something good. And the team in Milan, like me, they were so passionate and like super scared about breaking the Mario, who's their idol, the massive Nintendo files. All of them are.
Right. Yeah.
And like we're all thinking, we just got not to break this. We can't break it. And funny enough, Nintendo was saying, look, you can take Mario, you can do things that we can't do. Like you can give him a gun. Like they can't do that with Mario. They said, you take him. Don't make a jumping game like we do. Make something fresh and different with Mario, which is, super good of Nintendo to say that to Davide. And he was right, I'm going to make something different, and they backed it all the way. I mean, I think that was a risk, but it's, I think sometimes those things turn out really well. And because, as I say, everybody cared so much about, for God's sake, it's Mario, the biggest video game character in the world, scared about not breaking him, that everyone just poured their entire existence into making that game good, so it was a joy to do.
Nice. Well, to be fair, Mario has had some poor showings of third-party titles in the past. He's survived. He's been fine. It's nice that this one did very well.
Yeah.
Now, do you find yourself playing any of the games that you compose for with any great regularity, or is it kind of you're done and you kind of can't look at it like that?
Not especially. I think I don't have the time, honestly. That's the thing that I don't have. I feel like before I had kids and all that and wives and things, it was all a lot easier. And I feel like now I just don't have the time to do it. So I do my homework. So if I get something to do, I'll watch the videos that they send me. I'll read all the documents to get into it. And if it's something that's already established, my son often plays most of the games that I've worked on, so I can watch him play them. So it makes it easy for me. And also there's always usually a lot of Let's Plays on people's playing stuff that is similar, or so to get into the style of it. So, but I do think once I get the kind of style at the start, I'm kind of off at that point. I'm into it. It's just that initial, what do you want me to write kind of thing. And sometimes people don't articulate themselves particularly well when it comes to music because, it's not a language that everybody can speak,
Yes.
So I often say, send me a YouTube clip of something, a movie, a scene that you like or something, or an MP3 of music you think's a bit in the right direction, and I'll try and, do a little version and see what you think of it. And I often sort of say, if I can send you the first maybe 32 bars, 16 bars, 30 seconds of music and say, is this in the right direction before I do a whole piece rather than waste my time doing the whole thing and then scrapping it? So,
yeah.
I mean, a lot of people like to work like that because they like that kind of iteration. Because games is all about iteration, right? You're constantly changing and updating stuff and doing it again. So in music, I'm happy to do it the same way. So, that works out well. So till you get in the right direction, and I'm kind of off at that point. I can get stuck into it at that point,
Has there ever been a piece of music you've composed that ended up not being the right fit that kind of came back later, or that you were able to use in a later project that maybe wasn't the right fit for a project you were working on originally?
Well, sort of. I mean, when I did Dream, which turned into Banjo Kazooie, that was like a kind of, it became Banjo the Bear after a while. In that it was a boy character originally called Ed in that game, and I wrote like 107 pieces of music, which were very kind of Zelda RPG, wander abouty sort of thing, because that's the kind of game it was. And then when it switched into a platform and became Banjo Kazooie, I did pull some of the music from that into Banjo Kazooie, and some of it also made its way into Viva Pinata later on. So I think that I do have some files kicking around that I haven't used, but not a lot. I think I am quite, because I'll generally, I sort of generally get it right early on most of the time. I mean, not
Sure.
always, right? I've been known to write 20 iterations, which is odd for me. I've done that a couple of times. But I usually get it in the first 2 or 3 maybe. So I don't have an awful lot of scrap lying around really. Because people often ask me for stuff, you got anything lying around, and I look for it. I just haven't got anything really, not much at all. So, and also I think it's because, like, before I was a proper, kind of employed composer, I was just a guitar player in a band or a trumpet player. So, I'd write music or practice my stuff back then because it was my hobby. But once my hobby became my job, I just don't do it apart from my job. I don't write music for fun anymore. I hardly play guitar at all. I spent years trying to be Eddie Van Halen, and do as good as I could, and now I hardly play it really. And I kind of feel like it's, because your hobby's my job, I have no hobby anymore. I'm just a sad man with no hobbies.
Well, you said that you don't have a ton of time for games now, but back in the day, are there games that really influenced your love of gaming? Like, are there games that stand out as like some of your favorite stuff that you grew up playing?
Oh, definitely. Like, I think the SNES was like, before I worked at Rare, I was a massive SNES player, Super NES player.
Yeah.
I think my favorite game of all time is still Zelda: Link to the Past. I think that's my favorite game forever. Like, it's a fantastic story. It's a great game. The music's fantastic. Like, that's the first time I think I really noticed video game music to go, God, that's such a great, that tune is, the main Zelda, da 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 da, it's absolutely fun. What a fantastic tune to have written, that's going to last forever. Like, that is spectacular to me. So I love that. I mean, I was played, what else I played on the SNES? Games like Gods, Star Wars, the Final Fantasy ones on there, Shadowrun. I love Shadowrun. The music to that was also great. And I got an N64, of course, when I got to Rare. I mean, Super Mario, the first one, 64, is just an absolutely brilliant game, Zelda, Ocarina of Time, all that stuff. I loved doing Wave Race on that thing. And then I kind of got into, I started playing Star Wars Galaxies on the PC.
Nice.
quite late on, and then of course I got into World of Warcraft, and that was kind of it. And my wife just never saw me for weeks on end. So that was kind of it wasn't quite divorced, but I think it was getting close. So I mean, I loved when I was back in the UK, I loved playing World of Warcraft, and I got to I got to the. What's the one? I tell you what, I'm blanking on the name again. My memory's gone. I'm so old. What's the bloody? I'll remember it in a minute. But I mean. But when we moved to America in 2008 to Baltimore, and I just thought, oh great, I'll just start playing World of Warcraft when I get to America. But I called Blizzard and they didn't do international character transfers. So I was what? I was like, what? I spent all my life on my little mage getting up to level 60, whatever it was at the time, 70,
whatever the max was.
Yeah, and it's like I was always like, I'm just not going. I just can't go. I can't leave my mage behind. It's like it was heartbreaking so I did start again when I got across to the States, but then I kind of stopped. But I've been playing it. Funny enough. It was I guess early 2000s when I was playing it back then. But when my son's now 17, and when they just reissued World of Warcraft Classic, we've been playing it together. And it was so funny that when I played it back in the day, he was only 1 or 2, whatever it was, years of age. And now we can play it together, the same game. It's been really a nice, fun thing to do, to play that with him and, run about doing quests and stuff on the classic World of Warcraft. I've really enjoyed that. So, yeah, I guess that was my kind of. I mean, World of Warcraft did dominate a lot of my gaming time back then. I just played that and nothing else.
Wow, that's really amazing, right? That like a thing that you grew up playing now comes back around, and even with like the Switch having old games re-released, or Xbox One releasing the Rare Pack, which has all of those games on one disc. Like it's funny how all that stuff kind of comes back around. You said that your son plays a lot of the games you've worked on. He must understand that you're working on that stuff. Has he ever given you notes or been like, hey, what was this? Or, oh, I don't really like that. Like, is he honest with you about the games that he plays?
Yeah, he's honest about it. Yeah, I mean, most of the time he likes what I do, thankfully. So there's no conflicts. Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think his favourite's probably Viva Pinata. He loves that one. I think when he was a kid, he played that a lot. He must have been like 3 or 4, and I remember just going to off maybe 5. I can't remember. I remember just giving it to him and saying, "Look, there you go, mess around with it," because that's a real mess around game. You just sit in the garden and do stuff, right? And he loved the soundtrack and all that. So, but there's been funny events. Like I think that he was wearing like a GoldenEye t-shirt. He's at high school now to school, and some kids said, "Hey, you know what that is, kid?" Like he didn't know what he was talking about. He said, "Yeah, it's a GoldenEye. My dad did the music for it." And the kid was like, "Wow!" Like it's sort of really. Those moments are priceless,
Sure.
Oh my God.
Another time,
yes.
I think one of his friends had a cousin who was loving Donkey Kong 64, and his friend said, "Yeah, I know the son of the dad who wrote the Donkey Kong rap." So there's we went to Vaughn's literally a little while ago. He was wearing his Banjo Kazooie t-shirt, and one of the people there went, "Oh my God, what a great t-shirt!" I said, "Oh well, I did the music." Like, what? And so like now when I go to Vaughn's, they all kind of know who I am. I'm the Banjo Kazooie guy, that wanders around Vaughn's, aimlessly. There's that. I get recognised now and then. So there's little funny things happen like that. So I think he finds it quite funny. That kind of thing, and he just makes suggestions. Like I am sort of. I'm finally trying to write my own Banjo Kazooie remix album. I've been trying to do it for years, never got around to it. So I have finally done it. Well, I'm sort of 6 tracks in. So he's had some suggestions about things to do. Like he suggested that I should do a Game Boy version of Treasure Trove Cove. So I've kind of done that.
Oh, cool.
And he sort of said to me, "Why don't you take some of the minor themes, like Klungo's theme and Brentilda, the Good Witch, and kind of take all the little minor themes and put them all, like Nabnut the Squirrel, and put them all together and make it do that. That's a different thing to do, So he has suggestions like that. So he's quite. I think he does film at school, so I think he's quite creative in that direction. But it's funny that like when I was doing Mario, he'd wander past the room and say, "God, Dad, there's Mario on the screen there. You're writing music for it." And like those are little moments you kind of pinch yourself and go, is this really happening? Am I really bloody well working on Mario, for God's sake? You just can't believe it. If you told me that in '95, I'd just gone, "You're crazy," So there are little funny little things that happen like that, and he always kind of laughs at me and goes, "Oh God, Dad, look at this," So it's quite funny,
Sure.
Yeah. Now, is he also a musician, or also musically? Is that also part of his life, or is it just more? That's what my dad does.
Yeah, well, actually, no, he's not. And my daughter neither, actually. I'm actually secretly pleased that they're not musical. They both sort of did trumpet. Both of them did trumpet at school a little bit, but kind of gave it up.
That's fair.
And I bought Max a keyboard, and he's fiddling with it, but not really doesn't really care about it. So and I'm sort of glad, because I think that, lots of my friends back in the UK who were also, who played in local bands with me are still playing in local bands. They're still doing that kind of pub rock thing. Mm-hmm. I think making money out of music is very difficult, and I've been really, really stupidly lucky. So I feel like I'm kind of glad that, I wouldn't mind so much if my daughter played guitar in a band, because like usually girls don't run away and join a band and never come back, but boys do. So if my daughter still wants to do it, that's fine. But I kind of feel like my son doesn't want to do it. So I'm sort of secretly pleased that he's going to do, have a more of a hopefully stable career than mine.
It's nice to be able to share games then.
Yeah, no, and we do, and he's a big music fan. The thing about that is that it's funny, like, his playlist that he listens to is entirely games music.
Oh,
like,
wow.
There's no pop songs in his a rock or anything in his list. And that's such a sign of the times. I think when I was a kid, it was all about the pop songs that I listened to, or the rock bands that I listened to when I got older. The metal bands. And that's what your playlist was. You had albums then, right? And it's so peculiar to me that he hasn't got any interest in popular music whatsoever. Like, it doesn't cross his mind. It just listens to game soundtracks, and that's such a massive change to how things used to be.
Yeah,
that's true.
I think it's the access to the technology, right? With things like Spotify, like tons of your stuff is on Spotify, and you can find any of it, or a lot of it at least. I think that
all over gaming history, really.
And I think it's the tech that allows us to do it. It's funny you bring up your metal background again, because the question I'd wanted to ask that now puts this whole song in a different context, knowing that you were in a metal band, but the song Bears and Birds that you were featured on in Big Bad Bosses, I heard that, and first of all, it's so cool. You know, I love what the Gerard and the rest of the gang did for that album. It's such a fun idea. But to essentially do a song about yourself that's clearly very tongue-in-cheek, but there's a ton of heavy metal in it. Like, that must have been like feeling like returning to a kid a little bit, right? Since you wrote stuff like that, working on that must have felt like a return to kind of your old days.
Oh, that was massive fun to do. And me and Gerard are good friends, you know. So he said to me, do you want to come and do a rap track? I was like, what, me rap? You're kidding, right? I'm a British, British people don't rap. I know very well. And he said, no, it'll be fun. So I was like, oh God, I'll have a go. And also, I did that Game Grumps interview like a few years ago, and I just kind of cursed over the entire hour. And 'cause I didn't think much about it really. I didn't think that it would be anything. No one would hear it. Little did I know that millions of people would listen to that thing. My wife was like, for God's sake, Grant, why did you have to go and do all that swearing? Because because when my son's friends started to find it, or the parents was, oh, here's Mr. Kirkhope, let's listen to this, and it'd be like, oh my God, turn it off, because I was there absolutely. So she said, look, whatever you do, just don't do the swear. I said, Suzanne, don't worry. I'm not doing that ever again. Don't worry. So, because I said to Gerard, I'll do it, Gerard, but no cursing. He said, Grant, no, fine, don't worry about it. Of course, I get to the recording session, it's just completely swearing all the way through. So he said to me, we're going to do a radio edit version. It'll be bleeped out. Don't worry. I said, okay. So of course I did it, and then he said, oh, actually, it just sounds good with the swearing. So I think we're just going to leave it in now. I was like, oh my God, So my wife was like, for Grant Kirkhope, I told you not to do that thing. So I just don't seem to learn my lesson, and I'm a pretty foul mouth really, most of the time. We just ask my kids, so I feel like I can't escape it now. It's done. But it was great. It was super fun to do. I just drove up to Simi Valley and did it like in the morning, and Gerard's a good friend, so we had great fun doing it. But I just yet again I get my cursings all over the place, unfortunately.
Was that a song where they had written it and you just came in to do the vocals, or was it collaborative to write the music for that one?
No, I just did the vocals. Like Jake Carpenter did all the music on that album.
That's awesome.
Cool. So I just turned up. He said, hand him the lyrics. He was kind of as I was doing it, he was changing it as I was going along. He said, "Can you say this? Can you say that? Can you do this?" I was like, "Oh, it's like that." So, but it is super tongue in cheek, and I love Gerard, so I'd do anything for him. He's a great friend.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. Before we wrap up, it's really cool to hear that you're working on a Banjo Kazooie remix album that will come out eventually. Are there any other projects that you've wished you could revisit or tinker with that you haven't yet, that like you look back on fondly that you'd love to like play with or update?
I think off my own, probably not. I'm a super bad polisher. I just make it worse if I touched it again. It'd just get worse and worse and worse until it was like awful, unlistenable. But I think if I could touch something else that wasn't mine, I would love to have a crack at Zelda. I mean, I really would. That would be my ultimate thing. And also the Illumination are making the Super Mario movie that's coming out in a couple of years' time, and I really would like to score that. I mean, I guess that my chances are less than zero, but I am endeavouring to try and get my agent to try and get me somewhere even if it's demo for it. I mean, I'm sure they'll choose one of the Hollywood guys like they always do.
Right.
But since I've done a Mario game, and I've been respectful, I have communicated with the Nintendo. I have used their music, so I do know how precious they are about their stuff. And
right.
I know Nintendo like me. I don't know. I just that's my kind of little dream of it. To get to compose for that Mario movie would be my absolute dream come true. But as I say, I'm sure my chances are less than zero. So.
Well, if putting it out there helps in any way, I hope it does, because I think you'd be a great fit for it. I think that a lot of people are worried about that movie because, it's Mario. We're all so precious about Mario because we've spent so much time with him, and we want that to be a success. And your music would for sure sound great with it.
And I do feel like a lot of the times the video game movies don't turn out so well, generally speaking. It doesn't seem to work. But Sonic was good. So people that seems to be the first one where, all right, and the Pokemon movie, the Detective Pokemon was pretty good. My son really liked that, and my family liked that. So I do feel like you just got to have somebody who really cares about it. You got to have a director who understands what the gaming lore is and gets it. So having me, I'd be great, of course. I get it all. I'd do it all, So, but I mean, I don't know. I'm going to try my hardest to try and get somewhere in that frame. But as I say, I doubt it'll be likely.
Hey, you know what? You never know. And I think
I know. Fingers crossed.
I think the big conclusion from all of this is it's amazing what you can make and what you can do if you're passionate, you bring fun, and you just love what you do.
Yeah, I do think that. I think I have retained that. I've been doing it for 25 years, whatever it is. And I really have genuinely retained that. I'm still as passionate as I was, and I still get super. When I talk faster, I still get super excited all the time. It's like my wife's like constantly annoyed. Just calm down, will you, Grant? For God's sake, nothing doesn't take much to get me excited. So I really kind of I'm as passionate now, maybe more passionate perhaps than I was at the start of it. As I say, I would pour my entire existence into the Mario movie. I would just not talk to anybody for the duration of that project. It would be me in this room, never going out apart from food and bathroom breaks. That would be it.
Well, Grant, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I think I can safely speak for Geoff as saying we're big fans of your work, and we really appreciate folks like you in the industry who genuinely still find joy in gaming no matter what they do and bring that joy through, in your case, the music. So thank you so much for joining us.
That's very kind of you to say so. Thank you for asking me. It's nice to get to talk to somebody now and then. I don't talk to anybody these days.
Well, yeah, especially all things considered, we're all a little crazy these days.
Totally, yeah. I kind of feel like my life during the virus thing hasn't really changed. I just sit in this room, and that's it. I mean, it's not changed at all, apart from the fact I don't get the kids from school and I don't go to Vons. Those are the two tasks that I don't do anymore at the moment. But everything else is exactly the same. Nothing's changed.
I live in this vocal booth. I live here now.
This is just where I live.
Yeah, totally.
It's fair.
So hang tight for a minute while we wrap stuff up. Folks, if you're listening, first of all, thank you for listening. We appreciate having you here. You can let us know all of your thoughts on this episode and many others at certainpov.com, which is where this podcast lives. We would love to know what's your favorite game that Grant has worked on. He has a whole list on his website. You can find it super easy. He's done so much stuff from everything that we loved. And as always, this is a conversation we'd love to keep going. We would love to hear your thoughts anywhere on the internet. You can tweet at us. You can share on Facebook, on Instagram, wherever. But let us know what your favorite Grant Kirkhope tracks are. For me, I mean, Mumbo's Mountain... or Spiral Mountain, rather. I'm fusing stuff together. But Spiral Mountain is one of those songs that I think I will always, the minute I say the words, I hear it in my head. Like, I just hear the tune because I just spent so much time there. And so, like, that would easily be one of my favorites. But let us know what yours are.
We want to hear it. Please join us on social media. Join our Discord. Please check out all the other great Certain POV shows on the network. Just let us know your thoughts. As always, this is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I'm Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.
Did you know Rob Thomas has been writing since the mid-90s?
The Matchbox 20 guy?
No, the guy behind Veronica Mars.
Oh, and iZombie.
And Cupid, Party Down, the Cupid reboot.
I haven't seen those.
Me neither, but we should watch them and then talk about them on our podcast.
Yes. We could call it the Rob Thomas...
No, not that one.
Robcast.
Every other Tuesday with Alex and MJ.
Find us at notthatrobcast.libsyn.com or wherever you download podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.